With just 10 weeks left until the midterm elections, President Biden is returning to his central campaign message from 2020. He's set to give a primetime address about the soul of our nation on Thursday at Philadelphia's Independence Hall. The president is expected to highlight what he sees as the progress his administration has made to protect our democracy, while pointing out that America's freedoms and democracy are still at risk. A White House official says Biden will make clear who is fighting for those rights, fighting for those freedoms, and fighting for our democracy. Namely, not the Republican Party. In recent days, Joe Biden has called extreme MAGA philosophy semi-fascism a threat to the rule of law and a threat to democracy itself. But how did today's GOP, dominated by Trump and MAGA, how did it get here? Some might argue that Republicans first took a turn for the hard right when the party nominated Trump in 2016. Others would argue that it began with the pushback to the election of Barack Obama, the country's first black president. But one historian argues the Republican Party's radical shift starts well before all of that, 3 decades earlier, in fact, around the time of the end of the Ronald Reagan presidency. That's the thesis of Nicole Hammer's new book called Partisans, the conservative revolutionaries who remade American politics in the 1990s. She writes, nearly as soon as Reagan left office, the conservative movement he represented began to rapidly evolve, skittering away from the policies, rhetoric, and even ideology that Reagan had brought into office. In short, Hammer says, the sunny optimism of the Reagan era fell away and grievance politics took over. That takeover was spearheaded by political figures like Newt Gingrich, Pat Buchanan, and Helen Chenoweth. An evolving right-wing media ecosphere also elevated figures like Rush Limbaugh, Dinesh D'Souza, and Laura Ingraham. I wonder what happened to them. According to Hammer, all of these influential conservatives helped pull the GOP and its base more and more to the right. They attacked Republicans, even Reagan and Bush Sr., who didn't adhere to their hardline definition of conservatism. They railed against gun restrictions and abortion rights. They attacked immigrant Americans, linking them to crime and economic woes, often in overtly racist language. And little by little, these arch-conservatives came to see Democrats not as political opponents, but as enemies to be vanquished. Sound familiar? It's exactly what we're seeing from today's MAGA Republican Party. Nicole Hammer has charted in her new book how we got into this crisis of right-wing authoritarianism. So the question is, does she know how we get out of it? Nicole Hammer, history professor at Vanderbilt University and author of the brand new book Partisans, joins me now. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Congratulations on the book. The figures that I mentioned, your Gingriches, your Buchanans, etc., they're part of what you call a new right that emerged after the Reagan era. Just explain briefly for our viewers, how do you define the new right?
So this new right that emerges in the 1990s is one that is much less attached to the rhetoric and even the idea of democracy than Reagan was, than Cold War conservatives were, and who are really driven by a new media ecosystem and a much closer relationship with extremists and radicals, even violent extremists, than we had seen in an earlier era.
So you don't ignore, to be fair, the dark parts of Reagan's politics, including his racial dog whistles, his attacks on so-called welfare queens, the states' rights speech in Mississippi, where civil rights activists had been killed a couple of decades earlier, back in 1964. But in also describing Reagan's brand of conservatism as sunny optimism and in concentrating on the partisans that emerged after him, do you risk giving Reagan a pass when it comes to documenting the rightward shift of the Republican Party?
Well, this is why I wanted to be very careful to outline just those things that you were talking about, that some of the difference is rhetorical rather than real, but some of it had real policy implications. I mean, you mentioned immigration in your introduction. Reagan believed that the free movement of people and goods was an important part of how you won the Cold War. And almost as soon as he leaves office, you have somebody like Pat Buchanan calling for a Buchanan fence, which was the first real call for a border wall from Republicans. And I think it does matter, too, that you have a putting down of the dog whistle and a picking up of the bullhorn. You know, Reagan goes to Philadelphia, Mississippi, where he gives that states' rights speech, and that's bad. But Pat Buchanan goes to Stone Mountain, Georgia, and he talks about his conservatism in front of this monument to Confederate leaders. And that shift makes a real difference.
Yeah, all the way till you get to Donald Trump and where he gave his speeches and what he said in them. These partisans, as you called them, that come after Reagan were very reactionary, tapping into grievances, not just generally, but the grievances of a specific part of the base. You write, both the far right and the conservative movement helped give shape to the dominant political type of the 1990s, the angry white male. How did race play a role for these partisans?
Race is hugely important in their politics, and a very overt embrace of a pessimistic racism in the sense of, take for instance Charles Murray's book, The Bell Curve, this idea that race is genetically determined, that Black people are intellectually inferior, and that's encoded in their very genes. That becomes a more central idea on the right in the mid-1990s. And the angry white male, we talk a lot about the anger and we talk a lot about the masculinity, but the whiteness really matters too. The militia movements of the 1990s, they weren't just anti-government groups. Many of them had deep ties to white power organizing, and that is part of the base that Republicans are appealing to in that decade.
And you mentioned the militias in the 90s that were proliferating, these anti-government militias on the far right. And you had people like Congresswoman Helen Chenoweth, who many people might not have heard of. She was, in a way, radicalized by the siege at Ruby Ridge, which was in her district. She sympathized with the militias in the area. She was fiercely pro-gun. She pushed anti-government conspiracy theories. She, in many ways, gave voice to this angry white male, once saying it's the Anglo-Saxon male that's endangered. Do you see a direct line between her rhetoric and the rhetoric we see from a lot of House GOP members today? Not just House GOP members, also, by the way, Oath Keepers and Proud Boys.
Absolutely. Those kinds of connections and defenses of violent radical groups was central to Chenoweth's power. She was called the most radical member of a radical Congress for good reason. And the fact that she was a woman provided a kind of cover for the extremism that she embraced. I think that we're a little less vulnerable to that today, but in people ranging from Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann to somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Chenoweth is a kind of archetype, a role model for the politics that they would embrace in later decades.
So last time you came on the show, we talked about conservative media, and that's one of your areas of expertise. You wrote a previous book on it. Let's talk about conservative talk radio, the emergence of cable news, especially Fox, which gives a home to these controversial right-wing voices that other networks start dropping. It helps pull the Republican base further to the right. Someone asked me the other day, you know, can the Republican Party, can the right get past this current insanity? And I said it all depends on Rupert Murdoch. If Rupert Murdoch and Fox decide they want to normalize things, they will. If they don't and they allow things to escalate, they will. Is that fair?
It's mostly fair. I mean, I would say that the one caveat that I would throw in there is at times we've seen Fox News break a little bit from the base, and the base pulls them back. So that idea of Fox News as telling the base what to believe, it actually is just very responsive to the things that get the base most excited. I mean, we've seen it over issues of immigration. When Fox News tried to provide cover in 2013 for immigration reform, they quickly backtracked on that. The same thing happened with the 2020 election. We saw Fox lose viewers in that period, after which they said that Joe Biden had actually won the election. So it has some sensitivity to the base when they get out of line, but it plays a huge role, yes.